through downtown. You've been through space, Jupiter and Mars. When you coming back, hope you bring me a star. A little rocket boy, little rocket boy, a little rocket boy, little rocket boy, a little rocket boy, a little rocket boy, a little rocket boy. Save a star for me, little rocket boy, little rocket boy, a little rocket boy. Save a star for me. Da 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 da. Save a star for me. Da da da.
How does it feel in space?
Being in space is amazing. I mean, for us launching to orbit around the Earth and then go to the space station where I just was for 6 months, we're in an apparent microgravity environment. So for us, it feels like we're weightless, like we're floating. So you have to relearn how to live and work in that space. But once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were just talking, Jessica Watkins, another NASA astronaut, was just here, and she was saying that actually when you came back on Earth, that was an adjustment as well because you got so used to living on the space station.
Yeah, the transition home was actually a lot harder for me than the transition up there because our vestibular systems kind of remap. We start ignoring all the sensors in our inner ear that tell us how our bodies are moving because the space environment is so strange, but we really need that on Earth to balance and control our bodies.
Sure.
Core stage has been topped off, and now both liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen are 100%, along with the upper stage of the liquid hydrogen side of the equation.
We are go for a mission to the moon at this time. Engines on 5, 4, 3, 2. All engines running. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff 49 minutes past the hour.
I think the characteristics that I remember most of the Saturn V was the noise. The noise was enormous and it was almost impossible to communicate.
We're go, same time, we're go. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
There are so many things that we could eventually learn about our universe and the spacecraft that we use exploring.
We are a nation of explorers. During Apollo, we were on national TV literally every day because we were doing something visible that Americans could see and they could feel and say, look what we are doing. And I believe Artemis is going to come up and say, look what we are capable of and what we are doing now.
Artemis will stand on the shoulders of Apollo. They're going to have the eyes of the world on them when they start down this trail.
The science of a space flight is one that will continue to inspire. Going to the moon generates technology, more communications, more computer technology, more sophistication in manufacturing that help us in everyday life.
We have a generation that is ready, a generation with that technology, a generation with the education. Artemis represents the future in space. It is our next big step, and it is time to take it.
If you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we are showing you a live look of another visitor center. This is the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. Wow.
We have that hydrogen leak that was in the base of the mobile service structure here. That's been remedied. We haven't had any issue with those tail umbilicals that we were tracking so closely back in August and September. So everything looking really good with SLS. Just to recap, most powerful rocket we have ever built. It's propelled by 2 solid rocket boosters and 4 engines on this core stage. Now these solid rocket boosters are going to be firing for the first roughly 2 minutes of the flight, a little more than 2 minutes. And we call them solids because of the type of propellant in there. If you forgot it already, it's aluminum powder, ammonium perchlorate, and polybutadiene acrylonitrile. It's a binding agent that's inside. Solid propellants are extremely stable. They're very reliable, but once you ignite them, they're going to keep burning. You can't really throttle them up and down like you can with liquid-fueled engines. You can throttle just based off of the distribution, so you basically put more propellant in some areas and less in others as you're trying to really throttle the rocket down, which we do as we go through things like max Q, maximum dynamic pressure. And just a reminder, as these things are firing, they can steer, they can gimbal. The bottom part here, gimbal just means you can really direct, and they're providing 90% of the steering as SLS is making the flight uphill, and more than 75% of the thrust with those two firing at the same time. And again, they're attached to this. This is the core stage, 212 feet tall, the largest single stage we've ever constructed. It's been through the green run test, a lot of preparation for this flight today, and it is propelled by these 4 RS-25 engines. Now these are liquid-fueled rocket engines, so you have a fuel and an oxidizer, and one of the great things about liquid fuel is you can throttle them in real time. You could kind of like the gas in your car, you can go faster or a little bit slower. So these throttle up to 104% of their rated thrust at the time of liftoff. We throttle them down as we go through max Q, so the maximum amount of pressure on SLS on the way uphill, and then throttle them back up until they've consumed all of their propellants. And they're consuming that propellant at more than 1,500 gallons a second. That is just an astronomical amount of fuel that's running through these engines to produce that thrust. Each of these up to 500,000 pounds each during their operation. And of all the different components, we've got this engine block section down here. You have all of the associated plumbing, everything to feed those propellants down to these engines. You also have these 2 attachment points here, and that's where we actually tank the SLS rocket. So a lot of focus on those in the previous attempts. They've cooperated spectacularly so far today, and we've been able to fully tank this core stage. And a reminder, you have a fuel, about 500,000 gallons right here of liquid hydrogen, and then an oxidizer. You need those 2 together, and then an ignition source. That's what gives you your reaction, your thrust, your basically controlled explosion that then comes out of those rocket engines. So fully tanked. These are cryogenic fuels, hundreds of degrees below zero, so we've got a spray-on insulation across the entire vehicle. As it's sitting out there in the Florida air, it's a little bit warm tonight, but we need to keep those hundreds of degrees below zero. It takes a lot of energy to do that, so the less you have to use to keep them cold, the better, which is why we have that insulation. So we're going to be seeing SLS take flight for the first time tonight as we clear all of those final issues. Again, this is going to be one heck of a show when this thing launches into the night sky. So with that, send it back over to you, Megan.
For Artemis 2, Orion will have astronauts on board as it orbits the moon. Then future Artemis missions will land the first woman and first person of color on the surface of the moon. So Kayla, why do we want to go back to the moon?
The moon's a super interesting place to study. It can tell us a lot about the Earth, its own formation, but also more about our solar system. And we also want to return this time in an international partnership for a permanent presence on the lunar surface that'll teach us everything we need to know to travel onto Mars.
When I was a little girl, I wanted to be an astronaut,
a scientist,
a doctor,
a fighter pilot.
When I was a little girl, I wanted to grow up to be strong and independent.
When we were asked to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up, I drew an astronaut standing on the surface of the moon.
All I thought about was when I was going to get to NASA.
It's a huge honor to be NASA's first female launch director. To be the launch director for Artemis, NASA has so many wonderful women pioneers, so many heroes to me.
Some of the most amazing women in my eyes are people like Katherine Johnson and the other women that you've seen in Hidden Figures.
Sometimes it's difficult to believe that I'm on this side now wearing this blue flight suit with all of the other astronauts, representing this iconic image that had so inspired and excited me my entire life.
Being of South Asian heritage, Kalpana was just such a big thing for me growing up.
I've always looked up to Sally Ride and Mae Jemison, who really laid the foundation to allow people like me to be in the position that I am now.
All of these women were pushing those boundaries and breaking those glass ceilings.
Now, of course, there are some fantastic women in leadership positions that inspire me every day.
So much has changed since the Apollo program. During the Apollo 11 launch, we had one woman, one out of 400 engineers in the room. And I look at our team today, it's much more a reflection of the world that we live in.
A big piece of why it's so important to have women and diverse backgrounds, because it allows us to bring everybody along with us on this journey.
It doesn't really matter what you look like. If you've got the brains and you have the knowledge, we need you at the table.
We are at such an exciting time in human spaceflight right now, and Artemis is such a huge part of that.
We haven't been to the moon in many, many years. We have a lot of younger generation folks that have never seen that happen.
We will understand so much more about the moon, about the Earth, about our solar system.
We're going to stay. And to me, that's an amazing idea. The moon is going to be the blueprint for how we go to Mars and out into the solar system and maybe beyond.
It is incredibly exciting to be part of this Artemis team. It still feels pretty surreal to think that I might one day walk on the moon.
To see a woman and a person of color on the surface of the moon, to be able to say that space is for everyone and that we go to space to make life better here on Earth for everyone. I know that tears will be in my eyes.
My message to women and girls out there is to find your passion, whatever that is.
Don't let anyone tell you what you can do or can't do. Only you can realize your dreams.
Space is for everyone. And if me being in this role helps to send that message, I think that's a great thing.
And I just actually love that I don't feel like a woman at NASA. I just feel like a person at NASA.
The women of NASA are Artemis, and we make a difference every day.
I am NASA's Spacewalk Office Hardware Manager.
I'm the Program Scientist for Space Biology.
I'm the Director of NASA's Johnson Space Center.
I am Artemis.
I am Artemis.
私は Artemis です。Yo soy Artemis.
Us some Artemis.
Anna.
Je suis.
Ich bin
I
Artemis.
am Artemis.
I am Artemis.
I'm definitely, my excitement is definitely arcing, and I'm sure you can hear it in my voice.
I can't wait
certainly
for.
can, and I can feel it sitting next to you. I do get just a quick word also from our live stream production team that they have had their final debrief on the launch sequence for today's broadcast. So I'm going to leave you on the capable hands of not just Chris Gebhardt, but also Hagen Morton and Philip Sloss. They are our liftoff commentary crew for the launch of Artemis 1. Hoping to get a new T0 here shortly, and we'll be watching from here at the press site. Stay tuned.
And attention on 232, this is the launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range weather.
Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch.
Copy, LWO. And Mission Manager. And Mission Manager, Launch Director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you.
GLS is go for ALS.
10.
GLS is go for core stage engine start.
It's so bright I can't even get the rocket. Look at this. Or can you see it? I can even get the smoke burning. They fucking did it. Oh, this is amazing. Oh, this is amazing. Separation. Look like it.
Successful separation.
successful liftoff.